Hey there, welcome to Incorruptible Massachusetts. Our mission is to help you understand state politics. So we talk a lot about why it is so broken, what we can have here in Massachusetts if we fix it, and how you can get involved. And today we have the amazing, the fabulous Nichole Mossalam. Before we give her some space, we're just gonna have our two regulars here introduce ourselves. Jordan, are you ready to go ahead?
Yeah, Jordan Berg Powers, he, him, and I have many years experience in progressive politics, Massachusetts.
And Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford, ran for state rep, been doing a lot of state politics stuff for a little bit. And I'm so excited to have Nichole here, in part because we both ran in 2020. And she's just a wonderful teammate and person great to work with. Nichole, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about who you are and why you are running for office.
Yeah, hi everyone, Nichole Mossalam, she, her. I'm candidate for state representative, 35th Middlesex, Malden, Medford area. So very excited to be here. But you know, my journey, I guess, began when I first moved here to Massachusetts in 2013. You know, my husband and our young son, we moved here from Utah, of all places. But, you know, I first accepted a position as a part-time secretary at the Islamic Society of Boston in Cambridge. And I just wanted to get to know the community, you know, figure out the lay of the land, so to speak, make some friends. And then, you know, as most of us know, in 2013, the Boston Marathon happened. And that really, like, you know, acted like a slingshot, if you will, that thrust me into this very turbulent time. And it was really a sink or swim situation, you know, to be able to care for a grieving community, one that had been hurt for so, you know, by such tragedy, and also be able to, you know, engage in dialogue with the media at that time, which was not exactly friendly to the Islamic community. And so I really had to, you know, rise to the occasion, so to speak. And that's really what began, you know, my work with interfaith, community building, media relations, government relations, because we had to engage in dialogue from that point on with, you know, law enforcement, the U.S. State Attorney's Office. And at one point, I was even invited to be part of the CVE, Countering Violent Extremism Working Group here in Boston, and was able to go to the White House and meet then President Obama and Vice President Biden. And I guess you could say that's, you know, where I began exploring politics and the interplay with our community and how that happens. I really threw myself into it because it was rewarding. I felt like I was helping to build something and create something that, you know, would be better for our children, to, you know, create a more welcoming space. Unfortunately, I got another wake-up call in 2016, as many of us did, you know, during a highly, you know, highly charged electoral race, the presidential race. And my then 8-year-old son came home crying from school. And, you know, being a mom and, you know, concerned about my child, I asked him what's wrong. And he looked down and he talked to me and told me some kids at school had told him they didn't like Muslims. And if Trump were elected, he was going to get rid of all the Muslims. I'm someone who, like, I give my heart to the community. I give everything that I've got, you know. And again, it's to have my child sit there in tears telling me he didn't feel welcome or safe in his own home community, one that, you know, I bring my children with me to everything. You know, we do so much for this community. It was heartbreaking. And I suddenly realized, as I'm looking around, where's the local elected officials? Where are our national leaders? Like, are they speaking up for us? And it was also wishy-washy. There was nothing definitive that was coming from them to protect our community and speak up on our behalf when we're being scapegoated for issues that really they're responsible for. that they've been dropping the ball on. And so that's when I realized, yeah, interfaith work is great. Community building is great, but I've been neglecting the political sphere. Wasn't paying attention to elections really that much, didn't realize how much they impact us on an everyday basis. So that's when I started getting involved. And I first got involved with our Revolution Mass, became one of the very first co-chairs of the statewide ORMA. I ran for school committee in 2017. And while I didn't win, it really, it taught me so much. And I learned so much about the legislative process, especially with, education funding. And I realized, oh, school committee isn't really where I can make the impact that needs to happen. Because at that time, in the political discourse that was going on, we were talking about the funding formula, and they had done this big study, and they knew that it was shortchanging our children. And I went to, meetings and workshops that superintendents across the state were having. And I spoke with educators, and they were filling me in about unfunded mandates and the stress of high stakes testing and all these other things. And I was like, okay, what's going on? So I began looking at the state house where this money comes from. And that's when I noticed things about not just education funding, but that there's this backlog. It takes forever to get legislation to go through because of a lack of transparency. We don't know how our officials are voting. And I just started learning, case after case after case of how our state house is just failing us. And so when I was asked to run for the first time as state representative in 2020, I was like, let's go, because in between I was still doing all of my community work. I do nonprofit work in the daytime. I'm on the front lines every single day when someone can't afford their rent, or someone can't afford food, or any other needs, or someone experiences a hate crime or have their civil rights violated. I'm the person that our community comes to, and I have to field all of these different things, including immigration. I mean, just about anything under the sun. And so seeing all of that, and then being on the front lines and seeing the everyday impact and how the system affects families and affects our children and people who are seeking help. Like, I knew that I can't be silent anymore. I have to step up and take, everything that I've learned and bring it to the state house. And that's why I'm running.
Totally amazing. Well, I tell you, we also want to talk to you about the recent horrible Supreme Court decision, basically knocking down Roe versus Wade, taking away women's right to choose. We want to talk about this with you because you're running against someone who has a pretty strong voting record of voting against women's rights.
Yep.
And so we would love to just hear your thoughts on Roe v. Wade, your thoughts on, choice and reproductive rights and all of that stuff.
It's a gut-wrenching decision that came out, and I don't think we've even seen the full impact of it yet. And many people, I don't believe, realize what the full impact is. Roe isn't just about abortion rights. What Roe did was it established the legal precedent of our right to privacy. And that covers so many different things. It covers our right to contraception, marriage equality, so many rights that the LGBTQ plus community needs, so many rights that other marginalized community needs. It's a basic protection that we no longer have, and now each state gets to just decide willy-nilly. And that is just, when you really stop to think about it, it's terrifying, because we know that we still have bad actors in this country who don't think about the well-being of others. So, here in Massachusetts, thankfully, we've taken action. But as you stated, I'm challenging someone who doesn't have a great track record on these issues. He's repeatedly voted against a woman's bodily autonomy, her own decision-making process. We're not children, we know what's happening. And not just that, but for the LGBTQ plus community as well. He fought against marriage equality. Not only did he vote against it, but when it was finally ruled constitutional here in Massachusetts, he was part of the efforts to change the state constitution, to roll it back.
Wow.
I mean, people don't even realize that portion either. And trans rights, he's voted against. And I'm not just talking, to talk. Like, we have the on-record votes for this. And so this is something that we've highlighted in our district, fairly recently, as most know. And I was getting people coming and saying, no, we don't believe that. That's fake news. And so we did a Twitter thread on it. And I had screenshots of his votes. And I'm like, look, you need to know this. These are his recorded votes. It's not, it's not to call him a bad person or anything like that, and not to tear anybody down, but you really need to look at these votes and how they impact you. And this is real. And people were absolutely shocked. And just the response, we were completely unprepared for it. It was very awe-inspiring. And I'm like, this is not the only issue that this is on, though. I'm hoping people will now be willing to take a second look and see that this is a pattern. And, it makes me feel really good on the inside that recently we had this huge vote to extend further protections for the Roe Act and make Massachusetts basically a sanctuary state for women who are going to need it. And, my opponent who I'm challenging, he voted for it, but I was getting live updates from people inside the State House saying up until the last minute, they weren't sure if he was going to vote for it. And they know that he only voted for it because of the pressure from that one tweet, because people were suddenly paying attention.
I think I've said it before on this podcast, but I think it's important for people to remember when I came to Massachusetts and started working in politics here, we had a 1 vote pro-choice majority. Like, it was not long ago where that was not the position. And so there's been a lot of work to push better representatives into office to ensure that women have oversight over their own bodies, and people who use abortion as and I guess who use abortion as healthcare, but also people who use all sorts of other forms of contraception, all other forms of reproductive care that will now be banned because the people who are pushing these bans and who are celebrating the death of Roe don't understand how people's bodies work. And so they don't know the results. Like, they're just caught off guard. They're like, oh, I didn't realize that, like, you take a pill and it's not just for reproductive care, but actually it's to help your body function properly.
Yeah.
Or, like, they don't understand that all the different impacts because, they're just, they don't understand anything. So the Venn diagram of, like, don't know reproductive systems and are celebrating the Roe decision is a circle, right? Like, they just, like, right, like, these are people. And so, I think it's important that we remember that, like, it's good to have receipts. It's good to remind people, but it wasn't, your opponent was in line with a lot of other representatives, and they were taking votes that were bad for people in this state. And it's only recently, as we've been able to win, we've been able to push people, we've been able to, I think win's not the word I want to use, but, like, we've been able to bring people along to understanding the complexities of these issues and wanting people to have access to their full reproductive care, regardless of sort of people's personal feelings. And people get that now in a way that they might not have. And so that work has happened, but, your opponent's still stuck in the past. And it's only because of the pressure of this election that that's remotely changed.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because, as you were saying, there's women who rely on, contraception for reproductive health care, not just for, birth control. And I'm one of those women. At a very young age, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome and endometriosis. Those are two conditions that cause infertility, if not controlled. And the way to control them is through birth control. I would not have my 3 children that I have today if I didn't have access to birth control. That was critical care for me. And a lot of other people, they don't realize that about abortion either. For me, I used to be of the mindset, you know, that abortion is wrong no matter what, because I grew up Roman Catholic. My wake-up call was when I had a friend who had severe epilepsy, and she asked me to take her to the clinic to get an abortion because she didn't have a choice. She was on, you know, very strong epileptic medication and a pregnancy would, you know, interfere with the medication. And it would also, the medication itself would also harm her, you know, the baby that was growing inside her or the fetus. But here's the thing, nobody else would take her. And even though at the time for me, you know, this was very difficult, I was like, I gotta be there for my friend. And I had to sit there in the waiting room with her and hold her hand while she's crying because she had no other choice. This was for her life. And that really opened my eyes. And to see some of the other women who were in the waiting room and listening to their stories, I was like, that permanently changed it for me. It was, now I knew exactly what this was. And we all need that perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to comment a little bit on something you said before, that suddenly your opponent is facing a very strong challenge. And now they vote for something, they vote for women's rights for the first time. I mean, you know, surprise, surprise. And what I want to bring up is that a lot of people talk about how, oh, well, it's important to run candidates against people because even if you don't win, you push them and they change their votes on things. And I really want to be clear that people change their votes when it's 2 months from the election and they're worried. But guess what? They go right back and they change right back to who they were. We don't just need to run people. We need to run and win.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these changes often they don't take, right? This is not a permanent change. This is simply, as we're talking with, you know, with this one-time pro-choice vote from your opponent, I mean, the chance that that's going to stick, I think, is pretty low. And why do we want to take that chance?
Exactly. And I mean, I think it's great that under pressure and with the spotlight on, that, you know, a good vote was made. But here's the thing, we have how many votes, historically speaking, on record and verified that are, you know, in opposition to a woman's right to abortion and complete reproductive health care. And not just on this issue, but the Supreme Court has, you know, indicated its willingness to overturn many other rights that we've begun to take for granted. And he also has a similar voting record on these issues. Can we really afford to take that chance? We can't, I can't stress enough to people that nobody thought that this would happen in our lifetimes. Everybody thought this was a done deal. Yeah. Done. That the Supreme Court had ruled on this, and you know, that's it. You know, this is now the law of the land, and that has been overturned. And now it's not even just that. Now they're talking about going even further. And I've got my sister who married her wife and had to fight for custody of her son in Utah, calling me up crying because she is devastated that all her struggles up to this point will mean nothing. And she's calling me and telling me, you have to win. You have to fight because I can't have all of this mean nothing. And I can't have it back to where I can't love and be with who I love. Mm-hmm. I'm like, these are not abstract issues. These are people. They're human beings. And I don't care what your beliefs are. It doesn't matter. They deserve to be loved and respected. And that is not a risk that I'm going to roll the dice on. that is why I'm passionate, especially about this particular race, because I have something that I'm fighting for. People that I love and people that are hurting. And I'm going to protect that.
Whew,
And
right
I
on.
think it's important to note that that like the Supreme Court is gonna strike down what Massachusetts has done. It's gonna, Republicans are going to attack the protections that we have, and we need somebody we need a legislator who's going to react quickly to that, just as New York quickly reenacted the laws after it got struck down around its gun laws. And so we need a legislature that's going to react quickly, that's going to answer the call when it's happening, and not just because there's a re-election campaign. And so we can't trust that when there isn't an election happening, that this rep is going to then suddenly do the right thing and lead, or not drag their feet, right, or not make it so that we're weakening bills and making it more difficult to pass in an already difficult climate. When the Supreme Court inevitably strikes down equality for LGBTQ folks, starts to do regressive stuff around contraception, when all of these things, let alone the stuff around race and immigration, right, all the things that they are on the docket going to make worse in this country, we need a legislature that's going to act quickly to address those, to protect people in this state, to protect people. And he's not only is your opponent not going to do that, but likely is going to be dragging feet, being needed to be brought along, telling leadership they don't want to do it. Why do we have to do it? Right? Like, they're going to be a part of the system of making it slow down, not work, not go forward. And we don't have time for that. And we don't have time for legislators stuck in the past, trying to drag us back there while the Supreme Court's doing the same. Right? We need people who are going to be willing to fight, who understand these issues and have that personal connection to them going forward, because that's what we're going to need in these fights to come.
Definitely. And I think we need, some light shining on the process too, because I've organized with you guys in the past. We've done issues advocacy together. And so we've seen how many representatives will say, oh yeah, I'll co-sponsor this bill, or they've even a main sponsor. And then it goes to committee and they will work against it. But they're still able to tell, their constituents and their community members, oh, look, my name is on this bill, but they actively killed it. And, we don't need to name names. We know it happens.
Yeah.
And so people need to know how their representatives really are on these issues. And until there's some light shining and more transparency on the process, we're not going to get it. And that's what's going to light the fire, as you were saying, underneath many of these legislators who are dragging their feet. Like, we need people to see.
Yep. And speaking of dragging feet, just other things that you are in favor of. I think there was a recent poll saying that something like 88% of people in Massachusetts would prefer a single payer system here in the state. And sounds like something that you would be on board for.
Oh, definitely. We really need to address access to quality healthcare. When part of why this is very near and dear to my own heart is when I was 21 years old, I had to file bankruptcy on over $35,000 worth of pure medical debt. No credit cards, no loans, nothing. Because, I grew up in Utah, and let's just say affordable healthcare out there is non-existent, and so I have a genetic disorder that I was born with. And because I didn't have access to healthcare, I ended up with permanent damage. And I almost died when I had my first son, due to racist stereotyping healthcare, as well as lack of access to affordable healthcare. it was really difficult. I've seen it firsthand, so I know how important all of this is. We need to expand that here. We need that, more protections in place. And I've had, certain groups who are fighting for that, who've come to me and said, we've spoken to your opponent and we've tried to get him to sign on to this, even though, we have other reps here in Malden who do support it and have been actively fighting for it. But they're saying, this, our particular rep just is not supporting this. So they came to me and they were gathering signatures to get a non-binding ballot question on the November ballot, to basically, do an informal poll is the best way to put it, to ask the state representative, please support this issue because we need it. So we took them with us out on my campaign while we were door knocking, because this is, the district I'm running in is shaped very funky. So you can't do the traditional signature gathering of, going in front of the Stop and Shop or other, supermarket or other areas, because it's cut very wonky, very gerrymandered. And so we took them with us to, door to door to registered voters, and we collected signatures and, thankfully have that on the ballot. That and the transparency measure of asking, representatives to, publish their votes in committee. So those are two things that we've been fighting for. And again, that's something that, my opponent has voted against, when it comes to transparency. And, so it's been very eye-opening in this process, because I've had many groups come to me and say, can you please highlight this issue, because we've been having difficulty getting this representative on board with this, or helping to enlighten them about its importance. And so we've been trying to use, the platform of my campaign to highlight these many issues. And, in one case, one very glaring case with the recent vote in response to Roe, we're seeing results. And I've been getting messages from people stating, thank you just for running, because we know that he would not have voted this way or done this if it weren't for your challenge. And so that helps me, keep going, as grueling as this is, knocking over 1,200 doors just in 2 days on our campaign. Like, it's difficult, but you know what? That getting stories like that helps me keep going, because I know that win or lose, we're making a difference, but we're gonna win this.
Yes, right on. That's what we like to hear. Fabulous. The only remaining one thing that I'll say is that we talk a lot about the power dynamics here in the State House, and how much pressure there is to do whatever leadership says. And I know of a few people who will sometimes, actually there's another lawmaker that I know, someone who's running against, who literally in one of the cycles got 100% voting record identical to the speaker. That was a couple years ago, pretty interesting. It sounds like the other sort of outdated thing that your opponent does is simply to vote whatever way leadership says. And that is something that for sure is what's mainly needed in the State House, is people who are willing to stand up for what their constituents need and not just crumble under pressure.
Yeah. And we do. Our district is comprised of, so many diverse groups and needs of communities and individuals who traditionally go neglected, not seen, not heard. They really need a strong voice for someone who's going to stand up for them, who's going to listen to them and take their voices to the State House and properly represent them. I apologize in advance, but I'm someone who, through my life, I've been through hell and back. I've been through some very, very difficult situations in my life, and it's near miraculous, really, to be where I am in my life right now. I defy a lot of statistics. I'll put it that way. And what that translates to is that I'm a fighter. I've got a backbone. I don't cave easily. I'm, if someone can't get something done, they run into a roadblock. I'm the person they call, and 9 times out of 10, I get it done. That's what we need, I think, at this point. People who are going to stand up for what's right and act in the best interests of our community. And I really hope that people can see that in me. I'm not someone who puts much stock in words. Words are empty. I believe in actions. Actions always speak very clearly. And as someone who, has been in activism, advocacy, interfaith, community building, you name it, I've been out there. The community knows me. And if you haven't heard of me, go and talk to some of your neighbors, because most likely some of them have, and off season, election cycle, no matter what, I'm there, and I'm not going anywhere. So
right on. I know you're one tough cookie. Well, thank you so much. Last word there, Jordan.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I think we can't underscore enough how much of an empty seat this is right now. That, at this point, your opponent is there to be there. That's it. Voting, indistinguishably from leadership. Entirely, which just, I think it's it can be hard for people to understand that. So what it means is the speaker says, vote for this, and that's what they do. They don't add anything, they don't change anything, they don't vote their own way, they don't raise conversations about it, they're not in committee fighting for the residents in this district. They collect a paycheck to simply do what one person tells them to do. Their boss tells them to do this thing, and they do it. That's it. That's the only thing. And that is really troubling because we have real issues, in the district. We have real issues of housing, of making sure that people can get around, of underfunded schools, of a college education system where funding has gone down, and down, and healthcare that's unaffordable, unaccessible, and totally profit driven, right? These are real issues that continue to go unaddressed. And the way to address them is not to have somebody who simply just waits around for one person to tell them what to do. That's just that's not how we're going to fix these problems. And so, we should demand more than to say people, you get a job because you have the job and that's it. You're just there and then that's it, right? We can't complain that things aren't getting better, that things are the same, and then continue to vote for people who will tell you through their actions that they basically serve no purpose. And so I think that's really what's at stake when you say, yes, there's your opponent has some real regressive things, and we have a chance and opportunity to elect somebody who's passionate about these issues, who lives these issues, who understands these issues deeply, and also just, but on the day-to-day, mostly just does nothing. Mostly just collects a paycheck, and we don't have time for that. There are too many things going on to allow that. We need somebody who's going to fight for the issues and fight for people.
Nichole Mossalam, fabulous to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for knocking all those doors, doing all that work. And we will see everyone next week.
Bye, everyone.